So I'm constantly beating the shit out of the rule of 72 and trying to achieve a 10% return or a 30% return, and how we can achieve that. And you ask me, well, why do you do that? Well, what it does, it allows us to level the playing field, and we can compare our farming returns to the next guy, right? Yesterday I talked about billionaire farmers. There's very few of them. 90% of us have under $1 million, and so we're with the task of, let's just say we are going to take $5,000 a year from our town job and invest it in our little enterprise. If we can achieve a 13% return, which is pretty fair, over the 30 years, that's almost $1.5 million, and now you're building something generational. And so the first 30,000, you should be able to do 30%. You're farming with a pitchfork, you're providing all the labor, you're lean, mean, fighting machine. And then you have to buy a bobcat or a tractor or a baler, someday some real estate, maybe someday some part-time hired help. You lower your return, and that a turn approaches market return, right? The markets will allow you to make 5 or 6% on your money. They'll allow you to make 10, 15% on a cow if you're willing to feed it in the winter and carry water to it in the summer and market it, things like that. And, we can make a little more here or there on some locker beef. We can make a little more here or there on some project animals. But on any kind of volume, right, the guy sitting next to you that's got $1 million credit line, he's saying, hey, I can pay this much for these cows, make my 10%, and go home. So that's, the vagaries of the market. Eventually you're going to come down to even. But at 13% return, like I said, $1.5 million. The second reason that I'm constantly doing this is to just show you how devastating it can be to make a financial mistake. So you're on this trail, you're $5,000 a year, you're 10 years in, you've got $68,000. You get bored and you get impatient and you decide, piss on it, I'm going to go buy the $80,000 pickup. Or I'm going to go buy the $80,000 tractor with an air-conditioned cab. I'm sick of being out here in the sun. You set yourself back a decade. You get impatient and you go find a new girlfriend and you get a divorce. You set yourself back a generation. To the point of, some technology. We've talked about robot barns. You could potentially set yourself back a generation. But that's the key, right? 5,000 a year, 30 years, $1.5 million, $1.38 million, whatever it is. And you'll increase that, and you'll bring more. As you switch from bringing labor to management, you'll make more per hour, but you'll make less over the course of a month. And eventually you will come to a market average. And if you keep your death loss down and keep your mistakes down, then maybe your kids have a chance. But the fact of the matter is, if you're a first gen guy, you're just not going to approach that multi-millionaire status simply because the market and time will not allow it. But could you, over the course of a lifetime, do a little $4 or $5 million? Yeah. Right? So let's say 30 years in, you get to that 1.3 million and you keep achieving a 13% return. In 6 years and 5.5 years, it's now 2.6 million. Another 5.5 years, it's 5.2 million. So, if you can start at 25 and put in those 30, and then at 55, you can really start putting the whip to it and start producing those generational gains. That's why I talk about the rule of 72. That's why I talk about keeping your eye on the return of your investment. Not the return of the investment of the guy down the street that has a, $400 million generational, right? The guy that's farming 30 sections, he can afford to go buy a $1 million combine. If you've got, 30 sheep, you can afford a new pitchfork. There you go. God bless you.